The story begins with a monologue. Rain and wind come hand in hand with the evening in Kreissturmland. After generations of keepers, a house Spire's decrepit stairwells will always hide moss somewhere in their cracks, no matter how the casters work to keep them clean. He thinks of Zwillingsturme, of the time when the black spire, reminiscent of the twisted horns, had yet to be superseded by the newly erected twin spires, when the majestic city was called by a different name, of the dazzling auburn alleys in autumn, the kind he'd crossed through in his youth, still sans wand or dagger. Nestled in his hands were but a few bound poetry collections, and precious hopes of freedom. Not so anymore. Through the storm briefly abates, the spire's peak is still ruinously cold. Moonlight stabs through the drapery like rain, like a nail driven through each and every hope as it springs up. What a shame, he laments. Never again will he see the marigold in bloom. So, let's start this story with Viviana, visiting her home country, taking a break from all the glamour of Kazimierz to visit her father in Lithuanian. As she talks with the store owner asking for some recommendations, she finds herself lost in thought. She then gets approached by someone. She introduces herself as Kora Lowenstein. She seems to be suspiciously familiar with Viviana. It doesn't take Viviana much time to deduce that Kora was sent by her father. They don't get to indulge in much pleasantries, however, as Kora prepares Viviana to fight assassins sent after them. They easily dispatch said assassins as they abscond. Kora takes Viviana to a safe place and uses the moment's reprieve to check on her. She lets slip that Werner, Viviana's father, had passed away. She asks Viviana to follow her, to go to Zwillingsturme to fulfill her late father's wishes, where she will be under the protection of the Empresses, wherein she will serve as their voice. Meanwhile, Ebenholz is strolling through when he's suddenly stopped by a guard. He gets into some complications, but is saved by Beegler. Remember this guy from Lingering Echoes? Well, anyway, Beegler and Ebenholz catch up, the former puzzled that Ebenholz would return so soon, though they both already know the circumstances as to why Ebenholz is here. Summoned by the Empresses, Ebenholz leaves Beegler without another word. We switch perspectives again to, these two watching Arturia's performance. This guy in particular very much affected by Arturia's arts. Later on, this guy is very much drunk on Arturia. Like, my guy is obsessed. Like, look what he says. The days to come will be arduous once more. Oh, Arturia, only your music and beauty can deliver me from this nightmare. I mean, dude. Like, same, but let's calm it down here. Executor has been eavesdropping much to this guy's surprise, still chasing after Arturia. Basically interrogates the guy. Though they get interrupted by this other dude, they let slip that Arturia is already heading for Zwillingsturme, and that's enough for Executor to piece the fuck out of there. The very next scene, we finally see Arturia as she departs. As all of the main protagonists of the event sets off, their destination is made clear. All paths lead to Zwillingsturme. Chapter 1 opens with a painter, and their attendant concerned for them. They seem to be repainting the same piece over and over again, despite them being ill. This is when Arturia shows up, offering to assist the painter to accompany her with some music. We see one of the Empresses talking to Kora. Her name is... never mind, let's just call her Empress number 1. Kora introduces Viviana to the Empress. They exchange some pleasantries before getting interrupted by this guy. He brings news that some of the Witch King's remains have been stolen. We also find out that it's been 23 years since his death. Wait, 23? Huh. For some reason I always thought that the time of the Witch King was like hundreds of years in the past. You know, the Battle of the Four Kings and things like that seems like distant history of Terra. Well, moving on. The Empress thinks of sending several voices to sort this out and look for it, or Viviana interjects, offering to do it by herself, since sending many would attract unnecessary attention. Before they depart, the Empress shows Viviana the top-down view of Zwillingsturme. Viviana gets a bit lost in its beauty and grandeur. Later on, we again see Viviana as she approaches the gallery to see a guardsman and the captain there. She joins in their conversation, and we find out that the artist that made the paintings for the gallery had passed away finishing her paintings. Died because of the food and rest she deprived herself of when making the paintings. Suddenly, they hear gunshots outside. The guardsmen head over, while Viviana makes her way into the gallery. There she finds the centerpiece of the gallery. She observes the twisted black spirals. It seems just observing this affects her mind and her arts, as she feels her control of both start to slip away. That's when she appears. What a beautiful painting. So, this is when the first stage of the event starts. Presumably, this is the commotion happening outside where the two guardsmen went to investigate. Much like any of the first stages of events, this just introduces the most basic enemy units of the event to show up in every stage as fodder. The first enemy that comes at you is the Flautist. The only different thing about this guy from any other enemy basics is that he does slightly increased damage every third attack. The other enemy that shows up in this stage is the Trumpeter, very similar to the Flautist both in stats and mechanics, instead dealing damage in a splash every third attack. He does interact with the main mechanic of the event, the splash attack dealing arts damage if certain conditions are met, but that doesn't even matter yet, cause the mechanics haven't even been introduced in this stage yet. In terms of an introductory stage, it does about as well as any other, though better design would be introducing the event's mechanics before this and not after. I have to say though, the background environment of this event is quite amazing. It really nails the vibe that Leithanian has. But for now, let's move back to the story. Viviana is daydreaming, remembering the days when she first got into the Grand Knight's territory in Kazimierz. Kora snaps her out of this. Concerned for her, she asks what happened. Viviana explains what happened, but Kora immediately tells her not to approach the paintings. We find out that the black twisted spirals on the paintings are actually a mixture of originium crystals and the painter's own blood, done all for the sake of art, as originium was seen as another medium for the soul. Well, this at least explains why Vivi was feeling dizzy a while ago. Viviana, Kora, and the captain discuss what to do from here, deducing that it was the Remnants who pushed the painter to her death, revenge for betraying the Witch King. Viviana wonders if they killed her father for the same reason. Later on, we see the captain talk about how the intruder has once again eluded them. But then, suddenly he doesn't need to look anymore. Federico is still looking for Arturia and asks the captain about it, but he gets a call and tells Federico that he has other matters to attend to. Still, he can't just let an intruder be free, so the captain forces Federico to come with him. Captain Loris confronts thugs who have been vandalizing and loitering. He recognizes one of them and sees the thug carving a twisted horn reminiscent of the Witch King. Loris quickly destroys this and the kid gets mad, revealing that Loris was actually the first to set foot on the Witch King's spire. Things settle down as the thug runs away, but some random kid approaches them, curious to see if Loris will clean up the Twisted Horn sculptures. Loris, in dismay, wonders out loud why the youth is so obsessed with the Witch King. This kid says something quite eloquent. They're nostalgic for an era they never got to experience in person, but there's nothing wrong with that. All Leithanians are entitled to feel disappointed with how things are today. Well, there's clearly more to this kid. We cut to Ebenholz confiding in some random guy, but he's also keenly aware that he is being followed. It is a man sent by the Empresses to oversee him, make sure he doesn't die. It seems that he doesn't even need him, as Ebenholz was well prepared for an ambush that caught the man off guard. The Witch King's remnants, and a force that Ebenholz will never stop resisting. We cut back to Loris and Federico. They detected the use of arts. Adept as they are, they can obviously tell that someone is fighting. Federico insists that they go, but Loris just wants to report it back to the twin empresses. They confide in each other about cases that they grew obsessed about. The case that Loris could never solve, and Federico in his pursuit of Arturia. They hear a cello. Federico immediately wants to pursue the source, but Loris just tells Federico to go without him, saying that it's none of his business. Before Federico leaves though, he tries comforting Loris, saying that he does not believe that the hero is dead. Well, in his own way. Federico reaches the park, only to find this little boy again. And because Federico has absolutely no chill, he pulls his gun on the kid. The kid slightly panics, of course, but reassures Federico that he's on his side. Then, they both deduce that this was a trap set. Federico quickly figures that this was set by Arturia to lead Federico away. But away from what? Well, we cut back to Loris, making several phone calls to address the many situations rising up. But then he hears some music. A cello. Now, echoes of his past failures start to haunt him. He starts seeing illusions, but quickly figures that they aren't real. Nevertheless, he starts lashing out at them. He laments over the fact that he never got to find the killer of Yulia, the sibling of the youth making those twisted horn sculptures from a while ago. We really get a feel of how oppressive the era of the Witch King truly was. Loris stepped on a poster of the Witch King, which normally would get Gendarmeries, Leithanian guards, to arrest him and have him killed. But the guard that was there spared him, leading to that guard's very own execution. He wonders why he's disappointed that he lived as a hero, rather than die as one. Back to Ebenholz, he's still holding his own against his pursuers, but he's very much worn down. He can't last much longer. The Witch King's echoes don't let up, as they desperately want the melody inside Eban. But then he's saved by someone, a liberi in a guard's uniform. He tells Ebenholz to run as he holds them back. This then leads to the second stage of the event. The second stage finally has the main event mechanic of Zwillingsturme, which are of course the dynamic variations of music. When in crescendo or passionate variation, enemies will have increased attack speed and movement speed, while also cutting their defenses. When in decrescendo or melancholic variation, they have increased attack but reduces their attack speed and movement speed. Aside from that though, all enemies will gain certain buffs if their respective variation is playing, like the new enemy introduced in this stage. The Orchestra Hornist works as the basic ranged unit of the event, dealing physical damage normally, but when in crescendo, they will deal arts damage, and every third attack hitting an additional ally. Another mechanic introduced in this stage is the tuning node. Basically, you can manually change variations to make sure the enemy doesn't benefit from it with this thing. Hit it a few times, and when all tuning nodes are maxed out, you can switch variation, which boosts your operators as well. This thing is actually referenced in the story a lot, but doesn't actually show up in the story until much later, so if you hear me saying tuning in the context of the story, this is pretty much what it means. Anyway, the second stage doesn't really have much else, so we move on. Loris Borden is confirmed dead. Executor at the scene to confirm this, and Federico, the little autistic boy that he is, starts doing notarial hall regulations since Loris was a Lateran citizen after all. How does he do this? Well, he starts shooting up the statue Loris was left in to get his body and maybe find the last will and testament. Like, dude, 3 things that my guy really did not process. A. He was an intruder that was apprehended by Loris and was ordered to follow him around. B. His gunshots will be heard by a lot of people. And C. His dead body is right there. But yeah, of course the Gendarmerie show up to arrest him on the spot. He of course runs away and drags the little boy with him. This of course does not bother Federico at all and just speeds up looking for Arturia. The boy introduces himself as
Mikhail,
and is very much confused as to what Arturia's motive even is. Wonders if she's really that fucked up to want to watch Loris suffer like that and just not give him a quick death, questioning her morality. Federico interjects with a line that really makes his dynamic with her so interesting to me, because he inadvertently shows how similar yet how different they are to each other. If morals are a set of behavioral rules that ensure social order, then yes, Arturia is certainly a dangerous criminal with no regard for morality. However, if they represent the impetus and capacity to understand and respect the emotions and experiences of another, then I have never met an individual with more morals than her. Arturia did not intend to kill Loris Borden. That statue was an affront to life. She would have deemed it unbearably ugly. The rest of this part is essentially just setting up the next few chapters. Ebenholz wakes up from his rest to see stern youth taking care of him. Viviana wants to investigate the Witch King's remnants by reading at the forbidden section of the library, only to find out that the books related to them have already been taken. We see the other Empress Grimacht talking to someone named Vermont, and we find out immediately that it was them who took what Viviana was looking for. Chapter 3 acts as a continuation of the build-up at the end of Chapter 2. Ebenholz is still talking to stern youth, his allegiance still unclear. He's protecting Ebenholz from the remnants of the Witch King, but is also thankful for the tyrant. Regardless, someone calls out to him. That'll do, Lessing. It's Vermont. After quickly humbling Ebenholz and flaring up his insecurities, he checks on the melody within Ebenholz. Seems he's after that too. Meanwhile, Federico and
Mikhail
are still arguing on what to do, but they come across Viviana. She asks for directions from... They exchange some pleasantries, Viviana even offering him to come with her, but he respectfully declines. Though their meeting was brief,
Mikhail
immediately knew that Viviana was an Empress's voice, hence why he was so careful around her. This isn't lost on Viviana though. She also knew that child was some sort of spy, as she sadly tells this to Kora. Well, regardless, they talk about the past as Viviana looks at some of Seaman's paintings. Kora talking about how Viviana's mother and father were in their youth. This is when Viviana recognizes one of the paintings, that of a blooming marigold. She remembers her childhood before going to Kazimierz, about how her father always failed to make the flowers survive in the pots despite his efforts. Then, Viviana and Kora hear a cello. Viviana sees memories of her father taking the painting away. Seemingly right before she leaves for Kazimierz, Viviana starts wandering. And just as Kora was about to stop her, she seemingly gets attacked. We are taken to Viviana's memories. We see Werner talking to Kora, and then later Brandt, the Gazette's watcher from earlier. Brandt trying to rush Werner along, but he's still trying to wait for Viviana's mother. This, of course, is fruitless. No matter how hard Viviana tries to grab hold of her parents, to make her dad just wait a little bit more, to try and change the trajectory of their lives, she can't change a memory. Kora arrives at the scene, waking Viviana from her daydream to warn her about an ambush. Remnants of the Witch King surround them. Way too many for the two of them to handle. But Brandt arrives to save them and push back the assailants with some banger-ass lines, not gonna lie. As for you, embers of evil, filthy dregs picked from the trash heap, how dare you defy Zwillingsturme? And with that, we get into another fight. Continuing the trend of a new enemy per stage, this stage introduces another new enemy, the orchestra chorister, who is, for some reason, holding a lyre. By itself, it's not really a threatening enemy at all. When in crescendo, their attacks heal all surrounding enemies to them. In this stage, it's not really much of an issue, but leads to really scary moments when combined with enemies introduced later on, but they don't really show up on those stages. So anyway, the third stage done and dusted, we move on. After Brandt kills the Echo, he meets back up with Kora and Viviana, who still wants to continue her investigation. They inspect Seaman's paintings one more time, particularly her final work before she passed, titled Regret. The layers of paint indicating how many times she had painted it over. Kora asks Brandt to play the painting. He does so, making the layers of paint vibrate and peel away, telling a story for each layer removed. The original layer sees the throne of the Witch King empty, indicating that this was shortly after his death. Others who were there were Seaman herself, Loris Borden, and a Cabernet identified as Gerard Hoffman by Brandt, who was formerly in service to House Urtica. Meanwhile, we see Federico and
Mikhail
finally arrive at Baron Lucas's estate, but they were too late, he had already passed. There was a person in the scene though, who gave them a recording of Arturia's music at the time. Federico identifies an organ in the music, and
Mikhail
identifies the only place where that could be, a university that used to be part of House Urtica, Ludwig's Universität. We now cut to Eban, who is fighting his demons, and we see Vermont talking to this guy, and they're working together? Well, regardless, he immediately betrays Vermont to help out Eban. Chapter 4 starts, and our main characters are all in Ludwig's Universität. Viviana and Brandt are looking for Gerard Hoffman, or rather his teacher, being Vermont,
Mikhail
and Federico come here after finding out that Arturia was staying here. They notice that the place is filled with gendarmeries who are all looking for Arturia as well, under the command of one of the empresses. This surprises
Mikhail
and makes him separate from Federico as he wants to investigate something for himself. Meanwhile, Ebenholz is still trying to escape with this guy. His name is Gerard, by the way. This is the same Gerard that Viviana and Kora saw in the painting. He fought in the Battle of the Witch King along with countless of his classmates that died that day. Gerard tells Eban a little bit about his lineage, about how many Urticas have become rulers in one form or another. Ludwig, the university's namesake, was one of them. The fact that he had opened up his spire to the common citizenry caused people to think he was mad, to which Eban remarks that happens a lot in his family members. Gerard, however, says that madness and greatness come hand in hand, calling even the Witch King a benevolent ruler before he got mad. Viviana and Brandt at the lecture room where Vermont is staying. Brandt reports to Vermont saying that the Golden Movement has been stolen. Alright, a bit of a break here. I've been avoiding explaining this for a hot minute, but the Golden Movement is basically like Leithanian's anthem, but it also kind of works as its constitution. It is an extremely complex work of originium arts that binds all Leithanians together under one nation. Alright, explanation segment over. Vermont is livid hearing this and is mad that Grimmacht waited this long to tell him. Brandt explains to Viviana why the Golden Movement is so important, that it still has remains of the Witch King's arts in it. Well, Vermont says that it's Gerard that knows most about the Golden Movement from all the students. This brings Viviana to the point of why they're here, looking for Gerard as they believe he's the next target of the Witch King's remains. Though Vermont slips that he knows a little bit too much about the affairs of the remains, causing suspicion from Brandt and subsequent aggressive questioning. Stage 4 of the event is the first one to have more than one tuning node, though both are in very accessible spots. This stage introduces probably the first enemy that you actually have to change variation if you see them. The orchestra drummer already has fairly high ASPD, but combined with the fact that it gains 50 more on crescendo, will make it so that the splash every third hit will happen a lot, and unprepared defenses will easily get overrun by their DPS since they deal arts damage. In this stage though, they are very easy to manage, but in harder stages like S-3 and EX-7, they definitely pose a big threat. We go back to Federico's perspective as he's going up the spire to catch Arturia, when the person in question starts to talk to him through a sculpture. This basically confirms to Federico that Arturia is working with the remnants of the Witch King. Though, this little commotion lets the gendarmeries spot Federico, and although he tries to escape and is much faster, they still eventually surround him. Federico tries to reason with them, but their emotions are all over the place. Seems Arturia's arts is affecting everyone in the university. We also see this in the students outside. Panicked by the amount of gendarmeries in the area and the rumors of the Witch King's remnants, Arturia's arts quickly makes them suspect and attack each other, lessing in the scene to try and stop them, but there are way too many. He instead continues his pursuit of Ebenholz, who is right now still being led by Gerard to go somewhere. Gerard speaks of the Golden Movement, saying that all of the problems of Leithanion have existed as long as it has, and how unbelievably difficult it is to change it. But Gerard says that there is something powerful enough to do it, and that they're on their way to it as we speak. Though at this point, Lessing catches up to them and tries to intercept them, though Gerard's spatial arts make it incredibly difficult for Lessing to move and approach with an always shifting and moving staircase. Nevertheless, he still gives chase, even as Eban blasts him with his arts. Lessing pleads with him, saying that this is for the future of Leithanion, for the greater good, pleading to Ebenholz to not fall into their hands, to walk right into their trap. However, Eban still goes with Gerard, though he spares Lessing's life. We cut back to Brandt and Fremont still in the middle of an argument. Brandt is, of course, opposed to Fremont trying to extract the Genesis Horn, and is alerted by the amount of remnants hiding in the campus. He suggests demolishing the entire campus because of this. Fremont, of course, vehemently disagrees, but Brandt keeps pressing him. Fremont has a change of attitude, though definitely still angry, but this time with a more threatening aura. The sun outside the window disappears, the entire room filled with Fremont's shadow. Brandt tells Viviana to stand down and lower her arts unit. He definitely knows that neither of them has any chance in beating Fremont. Brandt reveals that he knows of Fremont's true nature. He's a lich. Anyone thrown outside into Fremont's shadow will instantly be engulfed by boundless darkness. Man, I really wish we got a CG for this. The imagery in this scene would have been awesome. Anyway, Fremont asks them to leave one last time, but Viviana still tries to negotiate. This is when Mika interjects, saying that there's no use in doing that. He once again introduces himself to Viviana, revealing that he isn't quite an Empress's voice, as he's only loyal to Grimacht, and that he's here to help Fremont reach his goal thanks to Grimacht's promise. They are interrupted by the entire Spire shaking, or rather, something under the Spire. Fremont seemingly immediately knows what it is. We cut back to Gerard and Ebenholz, the former practically jumping with joy with the amount of instruments and arts devices there are. Ebenholz, however, starts feeling searing headaches, as the remnants of the Witch King spring for the shadows. Gerard, however, is frighteningly unalarmed by this. Eban tries to protect Gerard, but the latter laughs it off, as he bashes Eban's head with a brass instrument. Jesus Christ! Combined with his searing headache, this of course makes him fall to his knees. The CG here is quite amazing. Even without the narration the game feeds us, we know precisely what's going on here, with the information of the Witch King saying, "Welcome back to your territory," and the imagery of Eban on his knees in front of that gaudy chair, but the shadow being cast not being his. Chaos starts to descend everywhere in the university. The remnants start to reveal themselves everywhere. Illusory arts confuse and make the students panic. Brandt insists Viviana to leave, but she insists on saving the students still inside. Even Mika is caught up in the chaos with the students. Also being caught in illusory arts, seeing the twin empresses, students start accusing him of being a monster because he's loyal to Grimacht. There is so much chaos with the students that they start punching each other. He starts crying to Grimacht, hoping that she would save him, but it's Federico that saves him this time, telling him to stand, and shakes Mika from the illusions. Federico assures Mika, saying that he's stronger than most. But when he needs it, Federico will be there to give him the help that he needs. Federico leaves Mika and tells him to help out the other students, while he keeps on destroying the sculptures that propagate the Echo's illusions. Back to Ebenholz's perspective, Gerard's still taunting him, still preparing Ebenholz for the return of the Witch King. Lessing arrives once again, insistent on getting Ebenholz back, though his path is riddled with many echoes, calling for the return of the Witch King. Lessing finally unwraps his blade, preparing to cleave through all of them, saying that the one sitting on the throne is not the Witch King. He says that the one sitting on the throne is Ebenholz, and that it is his duty to bring him back. As long as he lives and breathes, that there is nothing that will stop him from accomplishing just that. Fremont finally arrives and confronts Gerard, the latter not worried though since he knows Fremont won't do anything. Fremont is confused why Gerard wants to revive the Witch King in the first place. Gerard was a victim of his rule after all. He even went to Fremont all those years ago to ask help to stop the Witch King. But Gerard says that in saving him and asking him to study the Golden Movement, he started to idolize and idealize the Witch King. That throughout all the chaos and strife, it was only the Witch King's power that exterminated every existential threat to Leithanion. This of course was not the intention of Fremont, but it was what happened regardless. Gerard reveals that he is in the possession of the stolen Golden Movement. Enamored by the Witch King's arts still within it, he starts to cast it. A disgusting black flame riddled with originium crystals start to sprout in and around the university. Federico finally comes face to face with Arturia, destroying another sculpture as he arrives. He sees immediately that Arturia isn't playing any music, and quickly surmises that the illusions weren't caused by her. Rather, it was just the work of the Remnants. Seems Arturia is still waiting for her true audience. Federico continues to destroy the sculptures as he talks with Arturia. Federico says that her music won't reach the Witch King, as her music won't reach the dead. Arturia quickly corrects him, however, saying that this piece was never meant for the Witch King. We cut back to Mika, still helping out the students and gendarmeries. It seems that Federico had destroyed enough sculptures for them to regain their senses. He hurries them along, but is caught by the inextinguishable black flame caused by Gerard. Viviana arrives at the scene, parting the black flames with her shadows. As she hurries Mika along to save the students, she can't hold the black flames for long. We see that Brandt is still outside fighting back the Remnants. They taunt Brandt, saying that he won't be able to sustain his melody under all this chaos. Brandt thrusts his blade to the ground, proclaiming that if that is true, then he will kill chaos itself. A golden curtain starts to form all around the spire. An arts incantation that would have required 10 trained men was cast by just Brandt. All the dissonant notes of the Remnants were silenced within seconds, declaring that not a single remnant of the Witch King will leave the Spire alive. Kora arrives along with the Imperial casters under orders of the Twin Empresses, Brandt gladly accepting the assistance as he prepares to demolish the university. But then Mika yells for Brandt to stop, saying that there's still innocents inside the university. Brandt brushing this off, saying that there aren't any more students and Fremont will definitely survive the destruction. But Mika thinks of Federico and Viviana, the latter still trapped by the black flames. Upon learning this, Kora tells Brandt to stop, though Brandt is adamant that this is the best chance to destroy the Remnants in one fell swoop, saying that it was Viviana's own decision to enter the battlefield. Kora yells at Brandt, saying that they have an oath to Werner to protect Viviana, accusing him of forgetting that oath. Brandt thinks back to his past conversations that he had with Werner, and a conversation he had with Viviana just moments ago. Viviana, Brandt whispers underneath his breath. He shakes, he hesitates, and the golden curtain enveloping the spires start to crack. Resonance. At last I've got you. Arturia's melody has finally reached the soul it was meant for. As Federico destroys the final sculpture and goes to Arturia, nothing is protecting her anymore. Arturia tells him to wait one last time, saying that Brandt's will has finally broken free of its restraints, that his surge of emotions will lead him to the decision he will least regret. This is the moment I've been waiting for, she says, the truest climax of her piece. A melody so impassioned, it approaches piercing. It rings out from the strings of Arturia's cello. And as though motivated by the music, black originium flames rise from the deepest depths of the earth and tear asunder the surface mere inches away. The Witch King's musicians, standing guard at the foot of the spire, all walk single file into the black flames, chanting, even as they are incinerated into ash. The inevitable, indispensable, and eternal pillar. It now rises. It bores out of the earth's flesh. It bears a red tint to its blackness, a spiral shape, and a strange sharpness. The highest of spires, the long-lost Witch King Spire, stands atop the land once more. Well, with the climax of the first act of the story in full swing, Stage 5 of the event introduces the first proper enemy that you would definitely need to switch variation to, the orchestra wind player. Not sure why they don't just call it a clarinet, but this is the first enemy that benefits from the melancholic variation, and oh boy, they definitely do benefit from it. Not only do they get a bigger attack boost from the variation, but now all their attacks stun. You really don't want to be facing this guy in decrescendo. They also have another trait, where they stack their attack when unblocked, which makes their appearance in stages like EX-7 and S-5 particularly scary. This stage probably jump-scared a few people who didn't know about the stun mechanic, but aside from potentially embarrassing resets, we move on. The students are in a panic after seeing the spire rise from the ground. The black flames continue to spread at an alarming rate. Brandt sees all this, telling the Imperial casters to lower the curtain. It's of no use anymore. They're now focusing on stopping the spread of the flames, but none of their efforts are working. But then Mika exclaims, "She's here," he says, and that they're saved. A bright flash of lightning strikes the newly formed spire, demolishing it layer by layer. As fast as the tower raised from the ground, it fell even faster. Grimac looking at the rubble she created, calling the spire a fake. Federico tries to arrest Arturia yet again, but again, she escapes by jumping off the railing to the balcony below, saying that she'll wait for him at the bottom of the stairs. Meanwhile, Lessing apparently had the same idea to jump off the spire in order to save Ebenholz. Now that they're safe, Ebenholz finally gives in and trusts Lessing. Eben apologizes to him, and that he'll finally let them take the voice of the mundane from inside him. Cut to Gerard. Seems he couldn't handle casting the Witch King's arts, his body rapidly deteriorating, disappointment sprouting from his voice, saying that he couldn't become the vessel. Arturia shows up, curious to see what emotions Gerard here has in his final moments. Well, regardless of what those were, Federico is not far behind as Arturia feels Gerard's emotions fade away. Once again, they have an exchange of ideals. Arturia concerned with the deceased's last moments and the emotions therein, while Federico is more concerned with their last will and testament. As Arturia says, both ways are substantiating the meaning to have lived, just in different ways. Though Arturia ridicules him, saying that he should have helped Mika and that he could have found the one orchestrating this whole mess. Federico is, of course, uninterested, and simply restates that his duty is to arrest her, and this is not something he would regret. Arturia questions this, asking if he even feels any satisfaction in capturing her. Federico barely has any time to answer as Imperial casters barge in and arrest Arturia. Federico objects to this, but there's little he can do. Mika arrives and tries to vouch for Federico to at least get an interrogation, the most senior of casters dismissing both of them, saying that it was Grimac's direct orders that no one is allowed to go near Arturia, much to Mika's dismay. The casters leave with Arturia, Mika asking Federico if he wants to give chase, but he simply states that with Arturia apprehended, his duty is technically complete, but he affirms Arturia's question. He feels no satisfaction from this. Things settle down. Viviana is still trapped in the Spire, the fires and rubble keeping her from freedom, but she doesn't have to wait much longer as Kora and Brandt come to save her. As Brandt sees that Viviana is safe, he finally collapses. He's worn out. He used so much energy in raising the golden curtain. Kora tells Viviana what happened outside, about how he chose to save Viviana over destroying the Spire. Kora then assures Viviana that everything will be alright now. In the interlude, there are a few small things that happen. A lot of it setting up a new status quo after the climax that happened in the university. Practice for the celebration resume, the university was almost completely demolished. Grimac summoned Viviana and told her that the university will be no more. Viviana thanks her for saving the day, but asks to go see Arturia to ask her about her father's death. Grimac brushing this off, saying that the case has been closed already. We see Federico trying to say goodbye to Mika. His job is done, so he plans to report back to the Pope. Mika, in a surprising change of attitude, asks him to stay, saying that he has a bad feeling about everything, saying that things seem to be too perfect. He asks Federico to at least get some coffee before he leaves, to which Federico agrees. He remembers that Loris recommended him a place. The shop they go to has this guy. His name is Jan, by the way, brother to the victim that Loris was investigating. He insists that Federico investigates the case as well. He agrees, since he resolved in fulfilling Borden's last wish after all. They go to Loris's residence, and Federico quickly assesses everything about the place. He hesitates though, to which Mika quickly picks it up. He's still thinking about the case with Arturia. He sits at the piano and plays the piece that Arturia played, the one that turned the emotions of Loris and Brandt to notes and swayed their actions. His playing practically offending Mika, saying that if playing a piece incorrectly was a crime, that Federico would instantly be arrested. Even if Federico didn't play any notes wrong, there was simply no emotion to it. Mika urges Federico to place himself in the shoes of Loris, to which he closes his eyes. He thinks back to not only what Loris said to him, but also to the words Clement said to him at the end of Hortus. He thinks back to when the Pope told him to catch Arturia, and he thinks back to Arturia, questioning if Federico truly could not hear the emotions in music. Back to reality, and though he still could not understand the emotions, he realizes that since emotion is also information that Arturia extracts from the people, he just knows that she still has something planned. He has no proof of this, but he says that it's simply his intuition. Mika, in response, says that he wants to introduce Federico to someone. We cut to Ebenholz. He wakes up, Fremont there telling him that the melody inside him is finally gone, though Fremont says that the melody could never summon the Genesis horn in the first place. This information destroys Ebenholz. Fremont, of course, does not care, and leaves. Lessing arrives to affirm that the voice that Gerard implanted in Eben was not the right key to restoring the Witch King. Ebenholz thinks of his suffering, to the pointless death of his relative Kraid, that all of their suffering and his death was pointless. He asks Lessing what the point of all this even was. Lessing says that, yeah, his suffering had no meaning. He says that without the melody, that Eben is just a self-absorbed, self-harming, self-destructive, empty shell of a pretty boy. But even still, he tells Eben to fight back, to prove him wrong. This exchange that they have, I know I can't do justice with my narration. Lessing continues to beat down Eben, asking him what he's really done to help, or what he plans to do now. He encourages Eben to get up and fight for himself, fight their enemies. Lessing and Eben have drastically different sufferings, but even still, he makes Eben choose between wallowing in his despair or to fight and seek out the remnants who he is sure are still out there. To this question, Eben asks Lessing to pass his arts unit. Cut back to Viviana, who's still investigating, looking for Siemens paintings that disappeared. She's also not quite convinced that everything is in order. She still has so many questions about her father's death. Federico finds her and introduces himself as a friend of Mika. He suggests that they work together, saying that Arturia still has plans. Chapter 6 starts with Viviana visiting Arturia under the guise that she's under the command of Vivignale. I am never gonna try and pronounce that again. Though once she meets with Arturia, she's all too keen that Viviana is here of her own accord, wanting to know what happened to her father. Though Arturia wants something in return, a chance to look into Viviana's heart. Viviana is of course unwilling, so instead, Arturia proposes that they make a story together. Arturia starts the story, one that is all too familiar with Viviana. She's surprised that Arturia knows her childhood, to which Arturia says that this is simply a story that they're making together. Arturia sets the scene for the story, while Viviana acts as its protagonist. An impressive tower to which Viviana was kept. Her father would visit once a week, a meeting that Viviana always used to look forward to. One night, Viviana was curious and left her room to go look for her father when she saw a gathering of many families and their children smiling and laughing together. Arturia says, "That's when you realize that not every child had to stay in their room like you did, that they could hold their parents' hands and dance and sing to their heart's delight." Her mother rushed her back to her room. She heard her mother crying. She didn't dare look at her mother, and she didn't dare to ever look up at her father ever again. Arturia asks why. Viviana answering that her existence must be kept secret for the sake of her father. Arturia, unsatisfied by this answer, asks more concisely, "How did you feel?" She insists Viviana to think back to the memory that left the deepest impression. She couldn't look up at her father because he would see her tears. Tears of frustration, anger. She had already lost her mother. Now her father's pushing her away. Why couldn't he wait for her mother just a little longer? Why ask for Viviana to return only to leave one last time? Arturia sees the anger, the frustration in Viviana's eyes, the emotion reflected in her eyes as well. Satisfied, Arturia concludes the story and finally sates Viviana's curiosity. Werner simply wanted to hear Arturia's music so that he could see Viviana and her mother one last time. He died over a copy of the Golden Movement. This much Viviana knew, but he knew he was about to die. With all that said and done, Viviana has heard enough and takes her leave. Viviana then relays what she learned to Federico. They have to stop the performance of the Golden Movement. The Remnants have retrieved the Witch King's art and will definitely sabotage the performance with tens of thousands of Leithanians listening. They decide to tell a few people, Mika to relay to Grimacht, and Kora. Viviana goes to Kora and asks her to help stop the performance of the Golden Movement. Kora takes some convincing, but sides with Viviana as always. Mika on the other end is not so fortunate. Kora takes her to where some of the musicians are. Viviana uses her arts to manipulate shadows, to swallow up all the musicians here, so that none of them can use their instruments. However, the Golden Movement still starts all the same. We can see arts weave through the air. The performance has begun. We can see Leithanion in all its glory, the land of divine music and cradle of the arts. Back to Viviana, Kora explains to her that the Golden Movement itself is the will of Leithanion. It affects the very cognition of all Leithanian citizens. Federico notices that all the other musicians have fled except for one. His suspicions of the caster is confirmed as she's revealed to be a remnant. Federico and Viviana prepare for battle, the latter telling Kora to be careful, though Kora starts to cry as she listens to the Golden Movement, saying that it reminds her of how she used to love Leithanion. Alright, stage 6 now, and we get introduced to, in my opinion, the first of two high priority enemy targets, the Orchestra Tuner. They are the first enemy that doesn't have a set variation that they benefit from. Different tuners will benefit from different variations, and when they are benefiting from their variations, their attacks will debuff your operators, making them take more damage from all sources. Not only that, but when a tuning node is fully charged, they can drain the SP from it, making you have to charge it up again. All this combined definitely makes them a threat if not properly paid attention to. Their appearance in EX7 combined with another enemy that'll be introduced later make it incredibly hard to control the variation playing, and has definitely led to a few failed attempts from many doctors. But as we beat this stage, we move on. We seem to be in the past, in a first-person perspective of someone at a funeral. They were the last one here. Arturia approaches them. She was the one that played the music during the funeral. Turns out, the one that died was her old teacher. Arturia lamenting the fact that he would not let her play for him, that even in his dying moments, his heart was filled with regret. The person we're looking through says that they've lived their life with far too much regret. They let Arturia play for them. They lay all their memories and emotions bare for Arturia. Seems that they even witnessed the death of the Witch King firsthand, but could not show Arturia. Arturia seems to know why. She says that whenever they recall his death, there is a hand that truly moves their emotions. Whose hand was it? Arturia asks. But before they could answer, we snap back to the present, Viviana grabbing hold of Kora's hand, the former trying to protect Kora. "You're so much like him," Kora says. She tells Viviana about the time when Werner grabbed her hand during the siege of the Witch King's Spire, protecting her as well. This is the first time Viviana found out that Kora was at the Spire the night the Witch King died, though she doesn't seem very surprised. Werner protected her just as she was cowering, having just lost her sight. Kora covers Viviana's ears. As the music, the melody of the Golden Movement changes. We see in the thick crowd where Eban and Lessing are at that the people have started losing their minds. They are in immense pain. Eban and Lessing remain mostly unaffected, the former because he's quite used to such noise, and the latter because, well, plot. The remnants of the Witch King start sprouting from their hiding places and attack them. The Gazette's watchers mobilize and start fighting. Eban holds Lessing, Federico, and Viviana, all fighting echoes of the Witch King, while the echoes practically celebrate the inevitable return of the Witch King. They ask Kora why she's still hiding. Their victory is practically guaranteed. They call Kora their concert master. though Viviana has heard enough. Dispatching the echo, Kora surprised to find out that Viviana already knew of this. She's known it for a while, ever since she saw that Seaman's paintings were missing. The important ones were missing, sure, but also those depicting marigolds. Kora apologizes to Viviana, but the tuning of the golden movement still continues. Brandt and other Gesatz watchers still fighting, the echoes easily get overwhelmed by their strength. One of the echoes goes to protect Kora, only for Kora to stab her in the back. All along, she was asked by the Empresses to infiltrate and become the echo's concertmaster. But the tuning still continues. Kora, she is so tired of the golden movement. She's still tired of the pain, sorrow and regret, the hatred and conflict that the Leithanian people feel. Viviana is proof of this to her. The golden movement determined her entire life. Kora sees that they forced Viviana to live a life that wasn't hers, just like her father. She's sick of it. She's tired of the golden movement. She wants to destroy the old order with whatever means necessary. Viviana tries to convince her otherwise, talking about just how many people have suffered and died for a chance of things getting better. But they fall on deaf ears. Kora is resolute. So, Viviana knows what she has to do. Viviana stabs Kora, hugging her at the same time. Kora knew this was coming, knowing that Viviana can't turn her back on people suffering. As Kora is in Viviana's arms, she assures her that this'll all pass, that there's no need to be afraid. She wants to hug Viviana back, but her strength fails her. She doesn't even have the strength to wipe away Viviana's tears. Kora thinks back on her life. When she first saw Viviana, she knew that she truly loved her. And with her final breath, Kora tells Viviana that she truly deserves a better life. The dark clouds above the spire seem to change, the energy there now seemingly pacing, watching around its throne. The echoes realize that the Witch King has finally returned, so they start auto-sacrificing? Okay. Eban, seeing the Witch King, starts casting and shooting in the air like a madman, oblivious to the black flame about to crash into him. He's saved by this girl though. Lessing seems to know her as Ermengarde, a lich. Vermont was supposed to leave with all the liches already, but when he saw this, he of course had to come back. He asks if Ermengarde could send him up there, to where the Witch King is. Though, of course, it's not that simple. So Eban decides to ascend the Twin Spires to find a way into the Genesis Horn. As he ascends, he meets with Viviana and Federico, which this is the first and only time this happens in the entire event. They continue up the staircase. We cut to Arturia, with Vermont confronting her. What does Arturia do against such an overwhelmingly powerful person? Well, probe his emotions, of course. Vermont almost immediately figures out that it's her music that's making her do so. Vermont wastes no time at all and unleashes his threads on her. Though it was too slow and she still plays for him, showing him his very own memories. Arturia saw it. When Vermont gazed into the abyss, it almost swallowed him. Vermont has had enough. Enraged, he unleashes countless of his threads, opening it up and from the void on Arturia. And just like that, the sound of her cello disappears. Though this is exactly what she wanted. Federico notices immediately the lack of a cello amongst the sounds. Just as this happens, the stairs start to morph and extend, go about every which way in a manner that makes no sense at all. Viviana looks to her companions, but neither of them are there. On to stage 7, not much to talk about in this stage. As usual, there's one new enemy, the orchestra cellist, which serves as the tank of the event, having taunt and even getting a shield with reflect damage when in melancholic variation. But they're not really that tanky. They have a really high arts res at 60, and defense that may seem high, but even someone like Krooster can easily take them down. They also have more of an attack boost for melancholic variation, which will deal a lot of damage to non-defenders. In stages where it's hard to control the variation, they can become quite the threat, like in S-3, where their reflect damage even got buffed. So even though they can easily be dealt with most of the time, they still shouldn't be underestimated. Back to the story, and it seems that all of our main protagonists are in Kargereich. Now, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of strange things happen here, and it's not the easiest to follow along. Time and space work weirdly here, so there are a lot of characters that are in the same area, talking to the same people, but aren't with each other. So, for some of these parts, I will switch my narration style to a more expository one, to give clarity. We see that Arturia is already here. She caught a ride in one of Vermont's threads to get into the place, though she doesn't really know where to go or what to do. Seems that she can't play her music in here. In this place, anything real struggles to exist, but the Witch King created a bubble for him to stay in Kargereich, which is how he prolonged his will for so long. Anyway, Vermont wasn't too far behind Arturia, and of course, he's still mad and tries to exile Arturia again. Viviana and Federico, meanwhile, are still separated, both going up and down the non-Euclidean stairs trying to get somewhere. Viviana is lucky to have found a girl who gives her some hints about the area, saying that the stairs lead to where she wants to go. To which, the stairs started leading up to a door she recognized all too well. Executor, on the other hand, as usual, starts blasting his shotgun all over the place. The same girl yells for him to stop. She introduces herself as Yulia Schuler. Oh shit. Welp, Arturia wakes up from being knocked out by Vermont. Seems she's still very much alive in Arknights, though very lost. And look, Yulia is here too. Viviana opens a door at the top of the staircase to see her younger self. The younger version of Viviana shows the elder one around her room. She shows and explains the many plants she has. She seems so energetic and happy while doing so. Our Viviana asks to tell her the story of her parents, about what happened on that day in the Marigold Alley. The younger Viviana explains that her father had actually waited for her mother, determined to actually say goodbye, but in the end he couldn't bring himself to leave her and decided to go back home and force the other nobles to respect her. A wonderful life. All that Viviana ever wanted, she's seeing play right out in front of her. Until a maid shows up, rushing the younger Viviana along to get the gaudy carpet she's standing on. Apparently her mother is selling basically everything in the Spire to send her off to study in Columbia. Her mother, too busy to see her after Werner's death. He was assassinated shortly after he assumed his political position, his marriage with Vivi's mother causing offense to many. The young Viviana asks if they would have led a happy life if they were born as commoners. We cut to Arturia, still talking to Yulia. She realizes that she can't hear anything anymore. She's not deaf, it's just that all the voices of the others that used to fill her mind are now all absent. She thinks back to when she wasn't used to all these voices, back in her childhood. A young Federico approaches Arturia, the latter asking Federico to take away her cello. She can't stand it anymore. Every time she draws her bow, endless voices berate her head. It's nauseating. Federico, concerned for Arturia, asks if he should get some help, to which Arturia just asks for some quiet. And the two stay there, in silence. So, stage 8, and we are now in Arknights. While this stage doesn't introduce any new enemy, it does introduce the new mechanic associated with the new locale, the aspect of annihilation and the aspect of creation. The former being a deployable unit that has taunt, making your allies prioritize hitting it and absorbing all the damage that it receives. The latter shooting out all the stored damage that the former receives in physical damage. This thing absolutely annihilates, being able to shred through literally any enemy in the event, and I mean any enemy. This stage in particular does not show that, since it just wants you to use it to charge the tuning node. A very strange decision, since it leaves the impression that this thing is just for support and convenience, but what it's actually used for is killing literally everything. Well, regardless, we move on. Viviana now is out in a familiar street lined with marigolds. She's with another young Viviana. She greets a painter named Seaman with the cutest smile on her face. She's adorable. The game even describes her smile being as bright as the marigolds that line the alley. Seems this version of Viviana had lived out her entire life here as a commoner. Her father ran away and hid to live with her mother as commoners. Her father gave up everything to live a life of normalcy as a teacher. The young Viviana even helps out her mother by bringing her lunch every day. And today, she's bringing her cake. This life is wonderful too. Everything that Viviana could ever ask for. Until they overhear some people talking. Her mother was taken away. So did her father. It seems officials had figured out Werner's hidden life. The young Viviana hears this and drops the cake as she cries, while our Viviana tells her to not look. Arturia and Federico were both still talking with Yulia. The former had already walked with her a great distance. Yulia was starting to tell Arturia a bit about herself, about how she and Jan were living in a courtyard near the cafe where she was working, about how she even eventually bought the cafe when it was about to close down, about how she even made her very own special brew to celebrate the grand opening. And when the grand opening came, she was waiting for Jan and Loris. They went out to buy things for Yulia as gifts, cheering her on for the cafe. A beginning of a new life, something she had promised Loris. She was standing outside the cafe all excited when she noticed two men in strange masks. Then they noticed her too. Yulia Schuler. Your death was entirely coincidental, Federico says. All of Loris's speculations were not even close to the truth. Yulia says that she never even had a chance to fulfill her promise and asks Federico if he had any promises that were unfulfilled. He thinks back. His childhood, just shortly after he was with Arturia from her memory. He was approached by Arturia asking what he was drawing. Laterano during the nighttime. He seems to be struggling though, can't seem to figure out which locale lights up first when Laterano reaches nightfall. Arturia doesn't know, but then proposes that once she masters her method, that she would take Federico to the highest point in Laterano to see which lights up first. Federico didn't understand the implication of that back then, about the chaos in Arturia's mind. Well, regardless, Yulia still assists Arturia, almost done with tuning all the resonance pipelines so that she can see all the things that Yulia sees. As they complete, Arturia thanks Yulia for assisting her, and showing her her innermost emotions, even without her cello. But as she bows, the scenery changes, and she finds herself face to face with the Witch King. We're back in Ebenholz's perspective, in front of the Spire of the Witch King, finally confronting him, and practically giving a monologue cursing him. But when he enters the Spire, he sees an all too familiar room. The Witch King is there. It's when he was writing Siracusa out of the Golden Movement. Ebenholz is stunned seeing this. He doesn't even know what to do. This is when a young Fremont enters the room too. A memory. The two extremely powerful characters exchange in ideologies, debating and learning from each other as they always have. It's so fascinating. These two talk about eternity and the nature of morality. Though, Fremont in the present talks to the Witch King, and has had enough, finding the nostalgia quite nauseating. The penultimate stage of the event introduces the last elite enemy, the orchestra conductor. Much like the tuner, this enemy also doesn't have a set variation that it benefits from, changing from stage to stage, and also drains the SP from fully charged tuning nodes. When they are benefiting from their set variation, they increase the max HP of all enemies within their range. This makes enemies around them unreasonably tanky. In the stage where they combine with the orchestra tuners, along with the cellists, drummers, wind players, and EX7, it's incredibly difficult to manage the tuning node with a barrage of tuners and conductors, making either the drummers or wind players shred through your defenses with ease, since the conductor is making them incredibly tanky. All the while, the tuner is amplifying the damage that you take. Though the conductor doesn't look that tough at first glance, it makes rushes very difficult to handle. As I said, like in EX7 and also in S-3. Stage 9 here already showcasing how difficult it can be to control the tuning nodes when there are tuners and conductors in the stage. Ebenholz is still talking to the Witch King, the latter detailing his life to the former. His reign as king, his studies, and his conquests in the Battle of the Four Kings, even telling Eban where his dice came from. The Witch King takes him to Graf Urtica's spire, saying that he hates it too, but for another reason. It was too short. The Witch King always looking for higher heights, literally and figuratively in this case. He asks Ebenholz that if he sees this spire as a cage, how does he plan to break free from it? He asks how he would be able to defeat his enemies, and who his enemies even are. The Witch King shows Ebenholz many figures from his past, asking if these were his enemies. No. He asks if his enemy is the Witch King. Ebenholz thinks he's seen so many Witch Kings, from the different stories that he's read, different experiences he's witnessed, and yet they're all starkly different from the man he's facing now. No, the Witch King is not Ebenholz's enemy. But then what? He thinks about his past and what he's done, and quite literally faces himself. The Witch King died even before he was born, so what's the meaning of calling a dead man your enemy? He's walking through never-ending night, prepared to face the punishment he always says he deserves. But he says to himself that accepting punishment is not the same as finding redemption. He's grown stagnant. He's just afraid of even greater suffering if he moves forward, but then realizes the fact that if he doesn't move, he can never walk out of the night, and the night itself is meaningless. The Witch King now interjects, satisfied, and congratulates Eban. He even walks towards Eban to pat his head. Eban laughs. He can't help it. He made all this effort to find and kill the Witch King, only to receive his help and praise. And when he stops laughing, the Witch King and the spire around him dissipates. Viviana opens yet another door. This time, she's looking at a young Viviana that refused to go to Kazimierz when her father sent her away. This one begged Kora to stay in Leithania behind Werner's back, since she didn't want to go so far away from him. She puts aside what she deems childish fantasies of being a Grand Knight aside, so that she could be just a little bit closer to her father, even if he doesn't know. She's here for Kora too. She knows she can't support her much, but she says that at the very least she can hold Kora's hand when Kora needs it. They hear Kora arrive outside, or Viviana tells her younger self to sleep while she investigates. She sees Kora talking to an echo of the Witch King. It's Kora finally deciding to be their concertmaster. It still happens even if Viviana's here for her. Viviana is frustrated, not understanding why this would still happen. This version of reality dissipates to nothingness too. Viviana has been through countless doors at this point, and countless more open up to her, with countless possibilities of a better life. What if her mom and dad didn't have to hide their love? What if their love was accepted? What if the nobles had blessed Viviana's birth? What if her dad rid himself of his title and responsibilities? What if they just led an ordinary life? Would they have been happier? What if Viviana got back to Sturmland a day faster, so that she could see her father one last time? What if she was just accompanied by her books in peace? Would things have been less painful? She thinks back to Kora's words. You deserve a better life than this, Viviana. If there truly is one. Why, she asks. Why does every last one leave her so disappointed? Another path opens up to Viviana, a new door. She approaches it and turns the knob. She opens it to a familiar sight, her room at the top of the spire. She sees another young Viviana, reading a book that she knows all too well. After a cute interaction with the young Viviana being afraid of getting spoiled, our Viviana says exactly what her younger self will do for the rest of the night, detailing everything. Of course she knows. This is her memory after all, her reality. She prepares to leave. No point in staying, she already knows what happens here. She says she still needs to look for others, that maybe there's enough time to open another door. But then she's stopped by the young Viviana there, asking just how many she's already opened. She's looking for a better possibility, but what if there isn't one? How would she know that it's better anyway? How does she know she hasn't come across one already? What does she even want to accomplish by finding one? Nothing would change. The young Viviana asks if she's actually hoping that she doesn't find a better reality, so that she could say that she lived the best possible outcome. Disappointed, the young Viviana goes back to her book. This version of reality starts to crumble too. She tells our Viviana to go, that there's still a bit more time for her to open up another door. No, Viviana says as she clings onto her younger self, shielding her and protecting her from the collapse. She assures the young Viviana that the knights in her stories are real, that she has seen a knight glow radiant, and even though she isn't that light, she will always be prepared to protect it. And so, she declares to her younger self that she is a knight. As the collapse hastens, she's swallowed by the darkness. But she's prepared this time. Her sorrow and pain no longer able to win over her. She summons a sword spear and cleaves through the darkness. We cut back to Federico. Now that he tuned the resonance pipelines as well, he can now see where Arturia had gone in this place. He tells Yulia to stay safe, but she asks him something before he leaves. She asks how her brother's doing now, and asks if Loris had already died. The question surprising Federico, but Yulia figured it out because he was so concerned about what happened to her. And so, he tells her about how Loris's last will was for someone to continue investigating on her case. Federico also telling her about a letter addressed to her from Loris. It was spiteful, bitter, angry at Zwillingsturme, though Yulia stops Federico, saying that Loris wasn't that type of man. She feels sorry for him, blaming herself for what happened to him, though her thoughts interrupted by the sound of something crashing down. It's the twin empresses trying to break in the Genesis Horn for their confrontation with the Witch King, though the resulting energy pulse causes Yulia to dissipate. Federico tried to quickly alert Yulia, but nothing could have stopped it. He's just witnessed another death. He thinks back to Clement from the events of Hortus, about his confusion back then. Explanation-oriented that he is, he deduces what caused her second death. An energy wave no one could have prepared for. Another accident. Federico had witnessed so many deaths as an executor, but for the first time, he truly sensed someone's emotions in their final moments. Arturia, meanwhile, had witnessed everything. She saw the liberating laugh of Ebenholz. She sensed Yulia disappearing. All the while, she talks with the Witch King, finally having the opportunity to read his emotions, though she finds herself unable to do so, thinking that the karik is still preventing her from doing so. The Witch King corrects her, though, saying that this palace is exempt from the rules of the karik, that she's unable because of her own limitation. Regardless, he still lets her look into his memories. She sees his enemies, everything that he fought for, studying the karik. Arturia asks if he regrets being a tyrant, that if he wasn't, he would have had more time to make his palace here more stable. No. He lives with no regrets. The Witch King asks what Arturia really wants. Arturia answers with a simple reply. Emotion. A sort of empathy like the one the Sancta have. But she finds that one is too limiting. She wants people to have true empathy. She wants a future wherein everyone has a powerful soul. She acknowledges that pain is inevitable in the pursuit of happiness, but in her future, people would not try to avoid it or be ashamed of it anymore. The Witch King is rather amused and even interested in the desires of Arturia. But the Witch King had noticed something. It seems so very obvious, but it's something that Arturia had not even considered. The Witch King asks, "Much have you witnessed and experienced, and devoted you are to the power of emotions. Why then did you not seek it from yourself?" The Witch King almost effortlessly starts reading Arturia, performing her memories as she had effortlessly done to others in the past. The Witch King says that Arturia is without a doubt brimming with emotions, but none of those are her own. Inside she is empty, making others pour their emotions onto her empty vessel. The Witch King says that he does see the value of her future, that it may even find its place in time, but he says that it is Arturia that's the furthest person from her utopia. An explosion interrupts them. The twins had finally forced their way into the Genesis Horn. The Witch King prepares himself, as Grimact readies her sword and Ivignade readies her shield. The battle with the Witch King finally starts. Here we are. Probably one of the most powerful figures in the Arknights universe that we've witnessed so far, and he's the final boss of the event. The Witch King having unbelievably high HP and arts resistance. He has a lot of mechanics, enough to make an Ian player's head spin when trying to read it. In the first phase of his fight, he teleports around in set places of the map. He makes all enemies take less physical and arts damage. He can also brand your operators, making it so that they can't attack or activate their skill, also making that operator have increased taunt value and take periodic arts damage. Now you have to destroy this brand, otherwise the operator affected by it will instantly be retreated after a time. And it also explodes, dealing AoE damage to surrounding operators. Probably his most popular mechanic, after certain HP thresholds are reached, he will automatically redeploy 2 of your most recently deployed operator, or those with taunt, to random places in the stage. A funny ability, but it shows his arts mastery of space-time, I suppose. In Phase 2, the Witch King no longer moves, and at this point, you are definitely no longer in control of the flow of the fight. He restricts your usage of the tuning notes, taking control of them for himself, and making the buffs enemies receive from the variations stronger. On paper, with the amount of mechanics that he has, and how unbelievably tanky he is, he should be an incredible threat. But remember when I said the aspects of destruction and creation being able to shred through any enemy of the event? Though of course, you need to be very knowledgeable of the stage already to properly take advantage of this. Zwillingsturme itself, on paper, is a really difficult event, but with the mechanics, it makes it a really enjoyable experience. And the Witch King is the ultimate example of this. I make Cruz go burr on him so many times. This is the first major event where I purely used 5 stars to clear all of the stages and challenge modes, and it was incredibly fun. And so, with the Witch King defeated, the story reaches its... Wait a second. That music, I recognize it. Alright, let's do this thing, asshole. It's over. The Twin Empresses have destroyed the Witch King's pavilion. Vermont approaches the defeated Witch King to say his goodbyes to his old friend, Vermont giving the Witch King his final death. Back to the real world, everyone is stopped, their emotions drained from them. The karik is too close to reality, is going to crash into it. The calamity from the void eating away at all emotions of the people, leaving nothing. The void will explode through the cracks and destroy much more than just Leithanian. Vermont from the inside is using countless of his threads to hold everything together with the support of Ermengarde to create a passage for the people inside to escape through. We see Arturia standing in front of the crumbling Genesis Spire. Federico arrives and tries to arrest Arturia one more time, pointing his gun at her. Though, having lost her music, she doesn't really care anymore. She just asks him to shoot already. He refuses, of course, so she just walks past him. Arturia walks. We get to see the emotions, the minds that Arturia had touched in the past. Kora and her love of Zwillingsturme, and her hatred of the order that binds its people's freedom. Stefano, the abbot from Hortus, his doubt, the doubt of the Lateran law, the doubt of his bravery that made him mix seaborn flesh with sacramental bread, and doubt of his cowardice that frightened him of that sight, the doubt that, paradoxically, pushes him forward. And Loris, calling himself a pessimist and saying that disappointment is what makes him move forward. But despite this, he had still protected people. He questions if he still counts as a hero. Arturia walks. She walks along a beach, looking at a creature from deep in the sea, and thinks if the murmurs she hears are still emotion. Arturia walks. She walks along the funeral of her mother, asking whether or not the way to respect life is to face death with our truest feelings. Arturia wanted her mother to not feel so much regret. She wanted to free her from these emotions within her. Arturia asks, "Freedom is so hard to find, but why is death so easy?" Then she says, almost apologetically, "Federico, once again I couldn't control my music." Arturia, you revere death so much. The melodies of those who face the truth and inevitably their deaths leave you so impressed. But more often they leave you fearing, hating, doubting. But you are silent. How much more do you need to perform as you wander endlessly about? How long before you finally reach that future? How many more blank pieces do you need to compose for yourself? Even silence will be played, and every composition must have its conclusion. I saw your only truth. You are so fragile. Arturia stops walking. She opens her eyes in the plaza of Zwillingsturme, in a crowd with people devoid of emotions. She picks up her bow and grips her cello. She starts to play her music like many times before, but this time there are no emotions around her to play. So, she plays for her own emotions. One song dedicated to herself, with all the people around her lost, giving all their might to retain the last bit of their own emotion. She hopes that the tiny shred of ego that she has will connect to everyone. Arturia's music rouses Mika to action. He plays his tuba, which alerts the Gesatzwatchers, bringing them to action too. Back in the Karik, Viviana has met up with the twin empresses to assist them. They hear Arturia's music and see that the passage opened. The empresses tell Viviana to find Vermont and exit together, while they stay behind and push back eternity that threatens to crash into Lethanian. Eva Gignade will use her shield to protect the twin spires and everyone under it, while Germac will use her sword to fight back the void. She slams her sword into the ground, using her arts to control the fragments of the Genesis Spire to build a new one, as the light from reality drifts farther away from her as she blends into the monument she's built, erected to stop all the monsters from the void. The sunset returns to Zwillingsturme, and Eva Gignade descends with it. Now the sole Empress of Lethanian, her triumphant return from defeating the Witch King and the Calamity, being cheered by the people. With the Witch King finally defeated, we return to our new status quo, a few days after the events of the story. First, we see Eban Holtz getting scolded by Hibiscus, the latter angry at Eban for abandoning his duty on Rhodes Island, only having an unofficial letter without anyone's approval. But he tells Hibiscus that he plans to stay in Lethanian, to Urtica. He's gonna try and separate that name from the Witch King's legacy. Next, we see Viviana talking to Brandt. They talk about Kora and Werner, about the terrible situation they were both in. Brandt seems to be at peace with Viviana's actions toward Kora, even thanking her, while Viviana's feelings about her father was always complex. Always frustrated by his decisions, but in the end, she doesn't blame him for his failures, and is grateful for protecting what he can. Viviana decides to leave Sturmland and Lethanian altogether, rejecting the Empress's offers to be a voice. She sent a letter to Nerl actually, intending to meet up with her, so she sets off as she's informed that Nerl had arrived. With a huge smile on her face, she meets Tada Dest. Lastly, we have Federico, finally having custody of Arturia. He says his farewell to Mika, fitting because they've been through almost the entire event together. Before they leave though, Arturia asks Federico to look at the sunset at Lethanian, Arturia asking if he remembers the question he asked when they were kids, about which part of Laterano lights up first at sunset. Federico, of course, already knows the answer, just recently when he was appointed saint. Something Arturia realized and tells Federico is that she wasn't that scared the night when they were silent together. She says that the lights will turn on again eventually, that emotions like grief and joy, though only happen in moments, they never really leave. And with that, the story of Zwillingsturme reaches its end. The one through line I noticed between all of our main characters' stories is about meaning, like the title of the video implies. Eban Holtz struggling with the meaning of suffering, or rather the meaninglessness of it. Viviana trying to find the meaning in her father's actions, rationalizing them, and trying to find a better life for herself. And Federico and Arturia, of course, both substantiating the meaning to have lived in their own distinct ways. Well, regardless, this video took a really long time to come out. 3 months late by the time I'm recording this. Needless to say, I had a lot of trouble with it. Zwillingsturme is a huge story with many moving parts, and I wanted to represent all of it. But this made me rewrite the script countless times. Kinda made me realize a lot of my shortcomings. Next time I make a video similar to this, I think I'm gonna drastically change the style of it. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I can get back to regular uploads at least twice a month. Thanks again, and bye bye.